Hey guys, today we're going to talk about buying land and doing it affordably and kind of the things that I have figured out. I've done this. So I started my land journey, as they say these days, in 2014. I entered a sustainable agriculture program in the state of Kansas in Johnson County at Johnson County Community College. And I got interested in gardening and farming and organic practices, and this was shortly after the '08 housing crisis, because we got into some financial problems with that. And I began to kind of think about, moving out in the country and growing my own food and those kind of things. So I started this program at Johnson County Community College, and we worked at the farm, and we learned planting, and we learned all kinds of things. Took soils classes, took horticulture classes, all kinds of things up there. And we ran a little CSA out of the junior college farm. And that year I got very interested on the farm. My project was sort of doing berries, and I was into berries, I was into fruit trees, I was into those kind of things. That's what I was exploring a lot. Strawberries, blackberries, all kinds of things, thornless varieties. Those are the things I was interested in. And as I went through that program, I began to look around for land, like everybody does. And I hear a bunch of people talking about this. I think this is an important conversation right now, because I think we have an affordability crisis with housing. And I wanted to discuss kind of what I've done, what my project's been, and how this is all kind of played out, what this costs, and go over all these details. I'm down at my property today. I live in the southern suburbs of Kansas City, of the Kansas City metropolitan area. And when I started my looking around at lots, I got on a website called Land Watch. I think it's a great website. You can divide your where you're looking for land. It has a lot of lots in little small towns. And this is what I started looking at in 2014. I knew that I needed to be a couple counties south of Kansas City, because in Johnson County, which is a affluent, let's just say, suburb of Kansas City, a lot of money up there, you have a bunch of restrictions on what you can build. You can't just buy a lot, and you can't just put in a tiny home, because they have a minimum building requirements of about 2,000, and it could be more than that, but let's just say 2,000 square feet. This keeps property taxes higher and keeps your local governments hitting you with those tax bills every year. So they don't want tiny homes. They don't want smaller valued things in these counties. So I knew if I went a couple counties south, I got out of that. And I came down to Lynn County, Kansas. And I found this little town. It's called Prescott. And this is the place that at the time I bought. And I didn't have very much money. And I think that a lot of younger people don't have a lot of money right now. So we want to kind of talk about what I did. I've eventually bought, since 2014, I've bought an entire city block, and there are some benefits to this. So initially when I came down in 2014, I'm looking for a large yard in a county that I can put a tiny home in. The reality is that in Lynn County, Kansas, I could live in a geodesic dome, I can live in a trailer, I could live in I could live in a shack. I could get a storage unit. I can live in a container. I actually bought a container. I could build a container home down here. There are very few restrictions down here. I like that part of it. Also, the tax base, it is very cheap. Taxes are very inexpensive down here in Lynn County. So I came down. I knew I didn't want to be more than an hour away, because I knew I was going to have to be coming down. I was going to be planting my berries. I was going to put in my fruit trees. I was going to do these things. And I knew that I needed to be within an hour of home. And I'm about 45 minutes from my house up in the county. The reason I'm still up there is because I have kids in high school, and we like the school district, and I want them to be there. My daughter's graduating next year, going off to college, hopefully, or whatever she pursues after that. And then I think we'll be spending more time down here in Lynn County. But initially when I came down, I bought these lots, and I'm going to kind of expand out. So this looks big, but it's about the initial lots. There were 16 of them, and they were side by side. That road right over there with the power line on it is Old 69 Highway. This street right in front of me that you cannot see, I'll turn this around, right here, this street is Green Street. This is the furthest south street in the town that I'm in. So I'm on the very southern end of town. And I bought a third of the block. It was up for sale. Lady had bought it originally, I found out from the neighbor. that she had bought it for her kid. She was hoping maybe at some point she was going to give him to him and he was going to build a home. He moved out of town and never did that. So they were being mowed by my former neighbor that lived here, Earl. He was a great guy. And she was also paying the taxes on them, and I sort of knew that. I was armed with that. 16 lots, because they are on Old 69 Highway. They are 25 feet wide. They are 165 feet deep, which is 25 feet is a little narrower because they are zoned commercial, because originally that was the highway. This is like, your old Route 66 that runs out. This is Old 69 Highway. And this is how people traveled. It was a 2-laner out here. And of course, now they don't do that anymore because we have the 4-laner out there now, 69 Highway South, that they've rebuilt, much like an interstate. And so I knew when I came down here that I was on here. So it was, again, commercially zoned. So they're 25 feet wide. They're 165 feet deep. They come back here right along this line. This is an easement. And then they run out here back to the street back behind me. And again, that's Green Street here to the south. 16 of them went over to that trailer home, 25 feet wide. So that gave me just right at about an acre, maybe a hair over, which is about the size of a football field, I would say, with the sidelines and also maybe the end zones. This is about the size of this grassy area. My truck is back over there at the edge of them. My black Dodge Ram sits back over there. And this is what I initially started kind of gardening. I tilled up some rows in here. I put some different things in. We did garlic. We did some different things when we first started. But these were up for sale for $7,000. And yeah, small town, 260 people, right? Not a lot going on here in town. But there are some benefits to being here. So again, $7,000 is what she was asking. I offered that first year, I offered $4,000. And she said no. And so I let it go through the fall, and I came down. I kept coming down. I kind of checking out the town. I was making sure I liked the people. I wanted to see what it looked like in all the different seasons. I did some soil testing. I wanted to send that off to the lab to make sure that the soil was in good shape. Turns out it was fine. And I waited. I sat on it I didn't get emotional. I didn't get hyper about my lots. I knew I had time. You can start an orchard. You can do whatever you want to do. It's going to take time anyway, so what was an extra 6 months going to cost me? And so I waited through the winter, and I knew when we got into the spring of the next year that my friend Earl here, the guy that lived here, who has passed away, was mowing the lots. I knew that, and I knew taxes were going to be due that following year too, so I waited. And the following year, I'd offered my $4,000 again, and guess what? She accepted. So I got my first third of the block. The only thing that I put in here on this lot was a hydrant. There's a hydrant over there by that log pile. I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of over by my truck. So I put in a water hydrant. The beauty of that was the holes were already here and the utilities are all on these city blocks, but there was nothing else here. Originally, there had been a house on this, had a root cellar, and there's a little sidewalk that's left over. That's what the logs are stacked on up there. The house was gone by the time I got here, of course. Many, many years ago, they tore that down. There are the remnants of the root cellar, still some bricks in the ground and an indention over there. It's kind of interesting. And then there was the rest of the block. And I had some neighbors over here on this side back behind me. There's a little log pile there, and there's our southern street going down. And they had old cars sitting out on their third of the block. And then Earl lived up here on this part. I had that hydrant put in, and I had that when I called the city. They came out, they put the water meter in, and the water meter was $35 for the hookup, right? So if I had gone directly across the street and I had gotten out of the city and I'd gone right over here, there was a guy here, and you can see this prairie grass that's growing out there, a little blue stem, by the way. That's outside the city limits. So if I had bought the same amount of property right across the street and I needed a water meter, I would have had to run the water lines underneath the street, and then I would have had to pay $5,000 for my own water meter. Because I'm in town, and again on the south end of town, which I liked because I'm not in the middle of a bunch of neighbors. I'm on the south end, everybody's north of me. South of me was rural property. This was a sweet score. So I bought this thing. So $4,000 all in. I put the hydrant in for I think that cost me about $500 to get that put in. Had a plumber come down and install that. and I started running water, and they charge me $35 every month for the water. They do not charge me any sewer hookup at this point, but the beauty is we do have sewer out here. We have sewer, we have cable, we have gas, we have every utility that you would have in a city area. The beauty of staying in within an hour of where you live is that it's not really a beautiful thing. Actually, the closer you can get back to wherever you're living if you're going to develop some sort of a homestead, or if you're interested in tiny homes or gardening or any of these things, or just getting into a place that's affordable. I think these are the places to begin to check out. It's these small towns. And it's also LandWatch helps you get there. So check out LandWatch. Pick your county. Look at some counties outside of your area where you live. See if you can get into some rural areas and look around in those small towns. Pick some places that you've never been and go investigate those on the weekends. Check them out. Get to know the people. That's what I did. Met Earl. Loved the guy. Great guy. Older guy, lived here. He passed away a couple years ago. I got to know his family and his daughter and everybody. And when my other neighbors, Ron and Sue, had a trailer over here, and then they had some old cars. They moved those off one year, and I was kind of watching that. And I said, Ron, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm moving the cars over to the next block. And I said, well, what are you going to do with these over here? And he said, I don't know. You want them? And I said, yeah, I think I do. And so I made a deal with him. Now, I paid up on those because I knew I was getting the second third of the block. So I paid $15,000 for his lots, which were the same, although zoned residential, which meant they were 50 feet. There were 8 of them across, 7 or 8 of them across there, and they were 50 feet wide and 165 feet deep. I also picked up the easement in between them, right? So there should have been an alley that ran down this easement through the block, about halfway through the block. That's never going to be developed out. I know everybody in town now. I know people on the city council, and we're never going to do that. So that also became my land. And then when Earl passed away, I talked with his daughter. We'd already kind of talked about that ahead of time. He knew I was interested. He was thinking about going to a nursing home at some point. He knew I was interested in his property, so I'd already kind of talked that out. And what I got with his was this trailer. It's a 73-foot trailer. It's not something that I want. In fact, it's going to be hauled away here pretty soon. But there is a cinder block building back in behind it that was built in the 1940s, and I ended up picking up that section of this block for $50,000. So all in, I have a city block down in Prescott, Kansas. You can look at it on Google if you want to. It is on the corner of Front Street and Green. So Front Street is Old 69 Highway. And then Green Street is on the south end of my block, and on the north end of my block, on the other side of the trailer in the front yard there's a street called Pine. So if you want to look up Prescott, Kansas, and look at that little section, it's on the very southern end of town. There's an adjoining block beyond it that my sister, Ron and Sue, the neighbors, owned, the people that had the cars. They moved the cars over there. They eventually auctioned those off. And then they owned that block too, and my sister actually bought that block that adjoins this block. So we have the 2 southern blocks now in town. There are a ton of lots here. Why did I do this? Because I was thinking, I want something paid off, right? I'd gone through some financial difficulty. I wanted something paid off. I'd saved up my money for that. I own a business, okay? And so I bought those things. But I think you could buy this. Anybody could have come down here and bought this first acre and a quarter for $4,000. I mean, most people have that, and if you don't, you could have run it on a credit card. I wouldn't have any problem with that if you were going to pick up some land and you had an idea here, right? So the houses that I'm looking at that I'm going to put on this place are Kodasimas. Those are tiny homes. I'm looking at Kodasima, Kodasema. I'm looking at Ood homes. My little phone holder is not very good here. I'm looking at Ood homes as well, OOD. And then I'm also looking at these brands. It's called Massimo, Massimo, not to be confused with the clothing brand of the 1990s Massimo. Massimo has some houses, some tiny homes that are down in Garland, Texas. I've actually been down there and looked at them. They're sort of a space-age imported Chinese model. And I think there's 2 or 3 people that import those in the United States, and they all put their different badge on them, and they call them different things, but they're the same houses. I'm looking at the Massimo ones because I think I can get those trailered up pretty good. So eventually we'll make a decision on that. I've had all kinds of times. I've cleared a bunch of this property. It had a bunch of thorny locusts on it when I got down here. I cleared all of those. I've cleaned, I mean, junk, stuff out here. I mean, you can't believe the amount of stuff that was just hanging out on the lots, man, with the old cars and all the stuff. I mean, there's tires and there were wheels, there were all kinds of things. I bought a mower. I bought a container back over there. If you can see that, I bought that 20-foot container. I've got that. There's a video on that 20-foot container on my website already, or on my YouTube page. I jacked it up with trailer jacks to get it up off the ground. By the way, those are still working. A lot of people were very worried about that and didn't think those would hold up, and that was a silly idea. But it's now 5 years later, and those are still working just fine. The container was very nice. I store all my gear in there when I come down, but now that I own the rest of the block, and we'll walk over in a minute, and I'll show you more of that. In fact, I think I'll take a break right now, and maybe we'll come back to the second video. But so this is what we're talking about so far, right? We're talking about young people being able to get into an affordable home, not having to buy some piece of crap in the area they live. You want to get into something new. Maybe you want a small footprint home. This is what I've decided I want. So I'm looking at anywhere from 200 to 600 square feet. The beauty of this thing was it did have this cinder block building on it, so that gives me 3,000 square feet of storage space. And trust me, there's projects over at the building too. It's not like it's totally sweet. I've gutted it. I've completely cleaned it out. It took 5 roll-off dumpsters at this point, actually 6. I'm on my 7th one out front right now, but I've got it completely torn out. I got all the junk out of it because there was a lot of stuff left over. And I've tuck pointed some stuff on it right now. I'm working on windows. I've got ideas for windows. We're going to go over all of this stuff. And I think we'll stop the video right now, and maybe I'll have a second part where I won't be on it talking about this. I will just be walking around with my phone, kind of videotaping out in front of me so you guys can see the whole layout of the block and what everything looks like. I've mowed it all today, so this is all the mowing that I've done. I've planted in a wildflower meadow this year, so that's going to start popping up. I've put in some nut trees this year and some more apples. I'm working on all of those things. So I'll take a break here and I'll do a second video, part 2. I will label that on YouTube, and then I'll talk more about kind of what I found and what this all looks like.